So we're in the second name. We just sang these names. We're in the second name that's referenced by Isaiah in this series of Great Light. And the second name that's used for the soon coming Messiah, the one that we're all looking forward to celebrating on Christmas and every day of our lives, really, is Mighty God. Okay? Mighty God. So it was Wonderful Counselor last week, and it's Mighty God this week. You know, humanity, all of us, that might express itself in different areas, but we all love a hero. Like, we want to have a hero. There are legendary stories that are made up, and we know they're made up, like fables or mythology, whether it's Greek mythology or whether you're talking about Achilles or whoever it might be. There's these heroes that sort of represent the ideals of the people that they're fighting for. When a country comes together, there's usually some founding fathers or some important people like the Mount Rushmore in America that represent important times and important leadership decisions in the history of our country. We like to do this with political military figures, then we love to do this with sports figures, like if you're familiar with boxing at all, I like to talk about boxing. Most people don't. But if I find someone that likes to talk about boxing, I like to talk about it with them. And there's a famous fighter from the 1800s that played a really important role in American history called Jack Johnson. He would fight and go like 50, 60 rounds. And he was just this unbelievable fighter. You know, I see all these Jags jerseys today, and I think the city of Jacksonville, like, we're trying to decide, like, is Trevor going to be our hero? We want him to be. He's got all the skills for it. There was a moment there where we thought yes for sure, and maybe now we're wavering, especially last season, and we're opening ourselves up again to be hurt, but we're trusting and hoping that Trevor's going to come through. Maybe it's a show or a movie character for you. Maybe you're in a series of books, or you've read through a series of books, and as you've worked through those books, like, you really just identify with this hero, and you can't wait until the next part of the story, part 3, part 4 is released so that you can continue to track. But I would say in this country, we've probably done this the most with our sports figures. You know, anybody seen like The Sandlot? I don't know, it's not a Christmas movie. I always like to watch it this time of year. Maybe it's just because a bunch of kids, it makes me think about Christmas and growing up. But, you know, they talk about Babe Ruth, like the great Bambino, you know, forever. All right, I don't know if you've seen the movie. But think about coaches like Bear Bryant or Vince Lombardi, and they name like trophies after these guys. Michael Jordan, LeBron, who's better? All right, but if you grew up when I grew up, which is Family First Sunday, so most of you did not. A lot of teenagers in the room, but there's the guys that were celebrated and that we have celebrated. There was one guy that almost slipped through the cracks, but I actually think he was going to be the best athlete we've ever seen. And for me personally, he was the best athlete I've ever seen. He just so happens to be from Alabama, all right? His name's Bo Jackson. Does anybody know about Bo Jackson? Okay. You younger guys, let me just talk to you for a minute about Bo Jackson, okay? So he didn't go to Alabama, he went to Auburn, okay? So he started off his life in turmoil and poor choices. But the reason he went there is because the head coach from Alabama did not come to his house and personally recruit him, but the head coach from Auburn did. Pat Dye went to his home and personally recruited him, showed him that respect. So he went to Auburn, really changed their school forever because this guy was a phenomenal athlete. But there's this famous picture of Bo that was connected to this campaign that he was a part of for Nike called Bo Knows. Anybody remember this picture? Okay. Jocelyn, those aren't my arms. And Bo was known as like the first one through the gate to play football and baseball almost at the same time, like it would overlap. So he was the running back for the Raiders, okay? But he was also this outfielder for the Kansas City Royals. So he could hit 34 home runs and score 15 touchdowns within a few months of each other, right? He was just a phenomenal athlete. And there was all these legends. I watched this ESPN 30 for 30 on him that came out probably a decade ago now. But there was actually a lot of legend and mythology around him in the state of Alabama. Like, people hear about, you know, it's before social media. Word traveled differently than it does now. It was more storytelling. So you would hear about this guy that could like throw a baseball this seeming humanly impossible distance, or someone that jumped over a fence, like something that only you would expect, like a deer or something with 4 legs to be able to do. Like, there was all this mythology around Bo, and then some of that stuff ended up being real. There's like this famous clip of him going out to catch a fly ball, and he runs up on the wall. His cleats dig into the wall, and he like runs on the wall and catches it. And there's another clip where he's at the fence. I'm just going to talk about him the whole sermon. Where he's at the fence, and he throws this guy out at home plate from the fence. And I don't think it bounced, like a line shot, and throws the guy out. And the announcers were like, how did that just happen? Like, they can't believe it. Well, it was unique because all of our heroes here, they're flawed. Like, we find out something at some point, either a character flaw or a physical flaw, or we watch them decline, and it's really sad. Like, if they're basketball players, like their knees go out, or they get slow, or if you're into whatever, tennis, you see, Andre Agassi get beat, whoever you grew up watching, Federer. Well, Bo, it was interesting because he was at the height of his powers, right? Like, he's running the ball for the Raiders. He's playing baseball for the Kansas City Royals. And in what seemed like an average football play, he's got the football. He's running down the sideline. And someone's coming there, and he stops. And this documentary that I watched does this whole breakdown of what happened when he stopped. See, when Bo Jackson stopped, it was different than when he was running full speed. It was different than when anybody else stopped, because what he was able to do speed-wise didn't make sense with what he was able to do with his muscular makeup. So in other words, he was about 220, 230, but solid, lean muscle. But he could also run a 4.2 40-yard dash. That's basically competitive Olympic speed. So if you're going to have that much muscle, you're not really supposed to be able to run that fast. Or if you're able to run that fast, you're not really supposed to be able to carry all that muscle. So Bo Jackson's like the only person in the history of sports that when he stopped and planted his leg, the speed versus the length times the width times the height, I don't know. When he planted his leg, it exploded his hip. Yep, that's right. His hip just, and they didn't know, they didn't have all the MRI technology they have now. Now, like, somebody breaks their nail and they're back there doing an MRI, like they're on top of it. But at that point, he was like, hey, man, rub some dirt on it. We'll check it out after the game. So he just did his best, hobbled around. Well, his hip just sort of bled, and that's grossing you out now. And he was done. He was never the same. They could have caught it if they, checked things out the way that they do now, but he was never the same. He tried, but that was it. That was it for Bo. And so this unbelievable hero, and that happened in the 90s twice. There was this unbelievable hero that no one can believe could ever be stopped, Bo Jackson, whose greatest strength became his greatest weakness. His hip blows up. And then, obviously, the Mike Tyson knockout, if you're from that era, just shook the world when he got knocked out. So why are we talking like this? Well, I want to use that as a lead-in because when you think about the songs that we just sang, O come, Emmanuel, when you think about the way that Israel was longing, you have to understand so much of that context that Aaron helped us out with last week, but there was this darkness that the people were living in. Some of it was because of their own choices. It was because of the enemies that had risen up against them. It was because of their disobedience to God. But Israel was in a dark place. So we pick up in Isaiah 9, verse 1, nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who were in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the future, he will honor Galilee of the Gentiles by the way of the sea along the Jordan. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. That's where we get the name of the series, A Great Light. Okay? The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as men rejoice when dividing the plunder. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of the oppressor, every warrior's boot used in battle, and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire. Why? What does that mean? Why is that all going to happen? For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, meaning he can handle it. And he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace, there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. Lord Jesus, we thank you for your zeal to accomplish your good purposes in this world. We thank you that you prophesied a son to be given and that the government would be on his shoulders. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We thank you that Jesus is the fulfillment of this prophecy hundreds of years before his birth. And as we wait between his first and second coming, Lord Jesus, as we wait, we cry out, Mighty God. In your name, amen. I've been on a deep dive just on the person and work of David. And you notice it says, he will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom. Okay? The second most mentioned person in the scriptures is David. Okay? First is Jesus, and the second is David. And as we were talking about communion earlier, Melissa mentioned the lineage given in Matthew. Matthew knew his audience very well. He was explaining that the Messiah had come, the promised Messiah, from these verses and other verses. You see prophecy about David in Ezekiel, who's another Old Testament prophet, Jeremiah, Micah, Hosea, Amos. They all foreshadow David's kingdom, the throne of David's kingdom, based on the covenant that God made with David from the tribe of Judah, that you will never see an end to your throne. Jesus, as Matthew shows in the beginning, the lineage leading up to Jesus, born in Bethlehem, the city of David, being fulfilled, the fulfillment of this prophecy and so many others, coming to a conclusion, but really just a beginning in Jesus. And this name, Mighty God, it's, as per usual when you're getting into Hebrew, there's a lot of digging around and a lot of possibility and assignments of different, if they said it this way, but it seems to be used this way in this translation as well and in this other verse. So you have to live in it for a minute to really draw it out. But there are three different ways at least, and these can kind of be different combinations if you wanted them to be. But mighty God can mean like mighty hero or divine warrior or divine hero. So it's really interesting because there was an understanding somewhat that there was going to be a fulfillment of the lineage of King David, and that King David's throne from the tribe of Judah was going to reign forever, and that there was going to be a Messiah. Isaiah seems to be getting some sort of word here from the Holy Spirit that there's also not only going to be this human element to this lineage of this Messiah that's going to reign forever, but there's also going to be this God-like element to this human that's going to reign forever. Somehow it's going to be a combination of the two, because he's saying mighty God or divine hero or divine warrior. And you can really get into it with David, and our staff knows that I kind of am, maybe a little too much, but I'm getting kind of excited about all these connections, because if you see the way that Jesus is talked about in the scriptures, you go all the way to the end of Revelation, and you see Jesus being referred to as the root of Jesse. Jesse was David's father. I mean, almost the last verse in the Bible. The root of Jesse, the morning star, the Christ, the Messiah. So you see him referred to as the root of Jesse, and that's really interesting because Matthew shows us that he's the fruit of Jesse. Does that make sense? He's in the lineage of Jesse, the lineage of David, but Revelation shows that he's not just the fruit of Jesse, He's the root. In other words, this covenant, this lineage, the way that God was going to bring heaven and earth together in this one man, this one God-man through the line of Judah, but also God the Son, born of a virgin, was always the plan. So he's the fruit of that lineage, but he's also the root of that lineage. So this is all coming together, and Isaiah's just getting a glimpse. Mighty God. Okay? He's going to be a great counselor, which was common to call a king. He's going to be like a father over the nation, which was common to call a king. He's going to bring peace, which is what every subject of a kingdom longed for. They didn't want to be at war. But mighty God would have been a different slant. That would have been like some insight that only, well, it's all from God, but that would have caused pause, if you know what I mean. That would have given pause. Wow, he's also going to be godlike or divine. So Israel's in a dark time, and they need a hero. They need a divine warrior. They need someone that will fight for them. And if you flash forward to Romans chapter 8, you have Paul, who was such a faithful Israelite, but was confused. He didn't believe that Jesus actually was the Messiah, so he tried to stop the movement of the church. He had, to use the phrase of this series, he was knocked off his horse while traveling to persecute Christians by a great light. Really, a light that blinded him. And then God completely changed him through a series of events after that, and he ended up flipping that zeal in him to persecute the church to taking the church to the pagan world. He completely gave his life to it, and it involved a lot of suffering, imprisonment, churches that he had started and cared for, questioning him. I mean, he went through a long season of difficulty, but he believed that his suffering was going to continue to bear fruit for the kingdom, and it did. We're still reading his words today. So in Romans 8, and we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose for them. For God knew his people in advance, and he chose them to become like his Son, so that his Son would be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. So born into the earth, but then also as Jesus is resurrected, that's like also a rebirth, of first fruits of our rebirth. So we're born, but we have to be reborn. And having chosen them, he called them to come to him. And having called them, he gave them right standing with himself. And having given them right standing, he gave them his glory. What shall we say about wonderful things as these? If God is for us, who can ever be against us? Jesus is our divine hero warrior. He won, and he's working for our good. He won, and he's working for our good. This weekend was interesting. I had a combination of 2 celebrations and a funeral. We had our staff party, a Christmas party that we do every year, which was so much fun. We celebrated our son's birthday, which was a lot of fun. And then we also said goodbye to Betty yesterday, which was solemn, and we had some laughs, but overall a general sadness and a loss. Okay? And that is life. It's this combination of joy and sorrow, right? It is up and down, and some of you are riding that, and I don't know why it always accelerates this time of year, but it often does. I shouldn't say always. It often accelerates this time of year. Maybe it's because we feel it more deeply. I don't know. Maybe it's because of the seasonal change, a year coming to an end. I don't know. But there's this up and down, joy and sorrow. And it's overwhelming. You know, part of our prayer before the service this morning was honestly, God, just help us to wipe clean every single list or item that we brought in with us today so that we can just focus and be present. Help us to just be here present, right? Sometimes that's a discipline in and of itself, to be present before God, to be present here in the church, to be present with your family, to be present to what you're experiencing, to be present at work, just to be where you are is oftentimes difficult. And sometimes to be where you are hurts. But it can be overwhelming. And it's in these moments that we have to believe. It's in these seasons. Some of you might be in a really good season right now. I know that some of you are. Some of you have waited and waited and waited, and you've actually rounded that corner, or you're rounding it, and it feels really good. You're seeing a great light. You knew it was there, right? You've been hoping. You knew it was there. Some of you are still, you're on like that new long roundabout at McDuff. I don't know if you've been on that thing, but you're going all the way around, okay? You know it's helpful ultimately for traffic flow, but it's going to set you about 10 minutes going all the way around, okay? You're waiting to turn the corner. You sense it, but it hasn't happened yet. And you need to know that it's beyond your working it out. If you're like me, I'll go into work it out mode, figure it out mode. You need to know that there's something bigger than you. There's something divine that's fighting on your behalf, that's working things out for your good and his glory. And Paul's words here, I feel like when he's writing some of these things, especially when he's writing from jail or writing under persecution, I think he's writing things to the church, and he's also reminding himself of what he knows. Like if he's in prison and it's cold and someone's dictating what he's saying, I think he's probably he's like, man, I got to keep my mind renewed in here. I think it's a little bit of both as the Spirit's working through him. I think he's talking to them, and I think he's talking to himself. God knew me. God chose me. God knew me before I knew him. God chose me before I chose him. God loved me before I loved him. God saw me before I found him. God was with me before I realized it. God was waiting for me before I turned. You get it? Like he was there. He was walking with you. He was walking for you, working things for your good even before you understood it or acknowledged it. Paul goes on, since he did not spare even his own son, but gave him up for us all, won't he also give us everything else? Who dares accuse us whom God has chosen for his own? No one. For God himself has given us right standing with himself. Who then will condemn us? No one. For Christ died for us and was raised to life for us and is sitting in the place of honor at God's right hand, pleading for us. Our hero warrior uses his position to advocate for us. You ever been in a situation where you needed a really good attorney and yours wasn't good? I have. I've been in a situation before where it was around an accident, and I wasn't the one under trial or whatever, but I remember just thinking, man, this person's kind of weak sauce. I wish I had somebody that would go to bat for me a little bit harder, you know? But has anybody ever in a situation where you had an attorney, you had a really good one? Or like an agent or a representative, somebody that was speaking on your behalf, and they were fired. You were like, oh, this feels really good. I feel like somebody's going to bat for me, you know? I know I'm not perfect, but someone's speaking on my behalf. Thank you, right? It's kind of that feeling, like it makes you feel good when someone's truly advocating for you. Well, Jesus, the picture that Paul gives us here, and you know, Paul had deep insights that we don't fully understand. God revealed some mysteries to him that we're probably never going to see until eternity. But Paul had, in some way, shape, or form, realized that one of the roles of Jesus as our advocate, as our high priest, is that he used the position that he had been placed in. Remember, we've got a God-man there. We've got an ethnically Jewish God-man, like seated next to the Father, like in the lineage of David, from the tribe of Judah. That's our Messiah. He's right there. And what is he doing? He's advocating. Okay? The enemy's the accuser. So you know the holidays come in and you go, man, gosh. Anything that you've messed up with your family and people that you care about, it just gets accelerated. Any loss that you've experienced that was either a result of what happened to you or a result of choices that you made, it'll just get accelerated. Anyone that you miss, anything that you're sad about, anything that feels undone, anything that's not resolved. Like if it's not resolved, you can kick it down the road in July. You know, you can get out of July 4th plans like that. Like that's easy. Traffic, you know, whatever. But when you get into the holidays, you've got to face some things and come to, face to face with the reality of the world that you're currently living in. Good, the bad, and the ugly. And, you know, you think about when the year comes to an end, you start going, oh, man, I was going to do like 600 push-ups a day. I don't think I followed through on that. I think I did like 6 all year, you know. And you're just trying to come to terms with things like that, but also like maybe commitments you made, like things you said, you know, this is a little more serious. I want to stop doing this. I want to cut this out. Like I was going to work less and be more present, or, you know, I was going to check myself on this particular substance, but maybe I ran to it just like I did in 2024. Or, you know, I was going to hold off. Well, those thought patterns are ingrained in our fallen nature, and some of you are harder on yourself than others. But the enemy will join you in those conversations. He will accelerate those words, and he will go, yeah, look at all the ways you've screwed up. Look how you've messed up. Look at what you've done. If it's brokenness, if it's sexual brokenness, if there's a fallout, if there's a wound, a hurt, an emotional turmoil, he'll go, look at you. Look at this. And he accuses. There's a passage in the scriptures that's very important we have to remember. Is anybody familiar with Job? Like Job in the Old Testament? Job's not the easiest to understand, but it's beautiful. It's beautiful. The way it's written and just the truth about who God is. It's actually one of the oldest, if not the oldest, text that we have. But, you know, in the beginning of that book, the enemy shows up with like this host, like this council that has access to God, okay? There's this council that has access to God. Not like God's like, hey, guys, give me some good ideas for our strategy this year, but just like a host, a council of hosts that were in his presence, probably leading in different areas of the kingdom. Well, the enemy at that point still had some sort of access into that space, and he rolls up and he just discredits humanity, and God's like, what about Job? And the enemy just starts going in on Job, attacking, accusing. He'll don't worry, I'll get him to tap out on you too. I'll get him to tap out on you too. And then there's another verse in the scriptures, the actual location in the Bible's leaving me right now, but it says, I saw the accuser of the brethren thrown down. Okay? I saw the accuser of the brethren thrown down. So I actually don't believe that Satan has the access that he once had once Jesus defeated him, and that he's not standing before God accusing you, and I believe that Jesus is standing before God advocating for you. But I do believe that the enemy stands before us and accuses us because he wants to cut us off from talking to him. He wants us to give up on reaching out to our mighty hero that we need, the only one that can save us, the one that fights for us, the one that changes terrible circumstances and redeems them into good circumstances, albeit it might take a long time. But he will do that, and he can do that. He can bring renewal to places that we think are gone and dead and done with. So he does stand before us and accuse us. So a lot of times, if you think you're just a self-critic, you might want to check yourself and make sure that's not the enemy's voice. It could be you a little bit wired that way, and then it could also be him. And you can silence him, and you can pray for others and ask for others to pray with you to silence him and his minions, because they want to tear you down and make you tap out. And they love to amp it up this time of year. Paul goes on. Can anything ever separate us from Christ's love? Does it mean he no longer loves us if we have trouble or calamity, or are persecuted, or hungry, or destitute, or in danger, or threatened with death? As the scriptures say, for your sake we are killed every day, and we're being slaughtered like sheep. That's a psalm. No, despite all these things, overwhelming victory. I love that terminology. Okay? Overwhelming victory is ours through Christ who loved us. And I'm convinced that nothing can ever separate us from God's love. Neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor demons, neither our fears for today, nor our worries about tomorrow. Okay, we're going to need to pray about that during prayer time. Anybody that's consumed with worry or dread, I'm going to have you come forward. Worries about tomorrow, not even the powers of hell can separate us from God's love. No power in the sky above or the earth below. Indeed, nothing in all creation will ever be able to separate us from the love of God that is revealed in Christ Jesus our Lord. I don't even know if Israel really knew what they were longing for, just the depths of it, overwhelming victory. And now we see who's coming back. But I think we're still going to be surprised by the overwhelming victory that we have in Jesus. Mighty God, Prince of Peace, everlasting Father. The hero warrior serves, advocates, and protects us out of love. Jesus told his disciples that, remember, you didn't love me, I loved you. You go, man, this whole story is not about our great love for him. This whole story that we're a part of is about his great love for us. Thank goodness. Because where we're inconsistent and where we let go, he's steadfast and never changing. He set his love upon us. You can't break his covenants. What God has set in place, we cannot destroy. He has put his love on you. So no matter what you do, how unworthy you feel, how much you want to reject it or wallow around in your own sin, you can't undo that love if he set it on you, if he set his face toward you in that way, because this whole relationship's not being sustained by how much you love him, it's how much he loves you. So when you come back to him, you're not returning to your love for him first. That might happen. You return to your first love. But first and foremost, you return to his love for you. You come back under his love for you. Okay? And that's what sustains the relationship. And that's what sustains all of us. So a great light has dawned, and we're waiting for this second light, this second coming. We're in between. Okay, we're in between. And sometimes it's hard to believe that the everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, God with us, mighty God, is actually there. And there's a story that I've always loved. I grew up next to now it's a very flourishing, they call themselves the Porch Creek Indian Reservation. It's right on the Panhandle, kind of east of Mobile and northwest of Pensacola. But they're the Porch Creek Indian Reservation, and they're a flourishing community, and there's a lot of overlap, like in the church I grew up in with the tribe, and everything that's going on there just sort of bleeds over into the town. But there's a story about, it's not the Creek Indians, but it's a Native American tribe, and there's a story about the way that young men were taught to sort of a checkpoint from boyhood to manhood. I think there were several, but this was one of them. And one of the checkpoints is that the young man, when he reached a certain age, he had to go out into the forest, so he could take his bow, and he probably had his dagger, and he could go out into the forest, but he had to go out into the forest at night, so far from the village, so beyond where he could see the fire, hear the voices, hear his mother laughing, all that. He had to go way out into the forest and spend the night in the forest. Okay? So he would go out in the forest, and I don't know, have you ever walked around in the forest at night? Everything's a monster and it's awful, okay? So he's in the forest. You're like, I think that's a lion, It's like, you're in the U.S., in the southeast, it's probably not a lion. I think it's a lion, right? But he's out in the forest, and as the story goes, he's back up against a tree, and he waits, and he hears the owl, which, if you're in your bedroom at night, an owl's not that creepy, but if you're out in the forest at night, an owl's pretty creepy. Here's a bobcat. Pretty creepy, right? Here's some things just rustling around, which in the daylight is probably a squirrel, but you don't know what it is at night. So then, after he sits through the entire night, the sun begins to rise behind him. And if you've ever been in the forest when the sun comes up, it's really beautiful. It makes sitting through the dark worth it to see it come up and to see the forest come to life. But as a ray of light shines through over his left shoulder, he looks about 70 yards out, and he sees his father perched against a tree with his bow in hand, ready. So the boy went through the night alone, but not really. The experience was that he was alone. It felt alone, but his father was there. Okay? He was there. And the moment finally came where he could see how he was there. He could see him across the forest, and he knew that if anything went down, Dad was going to respond. Okay? And it's as we move through these moments of darkness, we're like, mighty God, where are you? Divine warrior, help me. We have to remember, also Paul's words, we focus our eyes on what we cannot see. You are walking through it sometimes in faith. You know there's a mighty God. It's not unraveled yet. That first ray of light hasn't bursted through the forest yet, but you have to know that you know your faith. You have to set your heart, focus your eyes on what you cannot see. That's faith. You have to know that he's there and trust that he's there and that he's walking with you. Not because of you, because of him. You can't be separated from his love. And Paul was one of these guys that was so hardcore on that. He's like, to live is Christ and to die is gain, because then I'm in the light for eternity. I'm with him all the time. He was that sold out. He was that all in. God is working for my good. When he calls me home, he calls me home. Whatever he has for me, I trust him. I can talk to him. I can make my petitions known. I can pray for breakthrough, and I am. But in the midst of it, he's there, and he's good, and he's mighty, and he's fighting on my behalf. Okay?